Good evening, everybody. Today's date is December 21st, 2020. I am your host, Tom Kaczynski. Welcome to Free Atlantic Radio. This is Tom Unscripted. Apologize for that here. So, over on Red Ice a few minutes ago, for those who have never watched Henrik and Lana Palmgren's excellent program they do. It covers things from sort of an ethnic perspective, but there are a lot of interesting people on there. So I'm dressed in my Russian garb to celebrate Christmas. And of course, that makes me look like a meme. And I'm okay with that. You know what? If you're not memeing, you're not scheming. So that's all right with it. I got the sunglasses on to look comfortable. I got my Lenin beard. I mean, I'm one step away from looking like I'm ready to read the revolution. So I'm glad you guys like it. Have a little bit of fun with this tonight. It is a holiday episode. I guess the next one, let's look what we got here. Man, Christmas. I don't know if I'll do a Christmas episode. We'll see. If a lot of people ask me to and you need an excuse to get away from your family and the wife participates, maybe I'll consider doing one. But so today's show, I was on Red Ice at 6:15. So if you want to go check it out, nothing you haven't seen before, but I will go back on there probably in January, maybe February, and we'll talk in more depth because one of the things tonight's show is going to be about is we're going to start talking. On Friday, we talked about the historical example of crossing the Rubicon and what that means. Today, we're going to talk more about nation development and why this left versus right thing's a catastrophe. But I'm going to start from the very beginning of this. Let me just say hi to everyone who's here who said hi to get things going. Ryan, good to see you. Mr. Fatface, glad you're here. Let's see, and I will get to your questions when I get a little further here. In fact, I will try to get to that question in depth. I see what you asked, Fatface, and that's definitely one I can do. Hippo, good to see you again, brother. Hope you're well. And, of course, to our good friend Kanaz, wonderful voice, the man, the myth, the one that makes New Jersey smell like a garden, not like a chemical plant. So let's continue about the show. Life's always better when you can fidget with some Legos while you do this. Does anyone else have this problem? Like I fidget with something. Whenever I'm doing something, I like to have something in my hands. It's just one of those things. Joseph, it's good to see you also. So let's get into the show. So one thing I wanted to lead with tonight, well, two things I wanted to lead with. We'll do a little bit of news before we do the monologue. The first thing was that the stimulus package is coming through, and the good news is Israel's getting 500 million, Sudan's getting 700 million, Ukraine's getting 430 million, and you're getting $600. So if you want to know what your government thinks about you, just look at a toilet sometime before you flush and you have a pretty good impression of how our government looks at us. They want you poor. And it's kind of interesting how it works out. The right goes through this and thinks, well, you know what? We have money, and if you don't, it's your fault. So that's not it. The left is more calculating, though. What they'll do is they'll go forward and they'll be like, okay, well, the poorer and more desperate you are, the more you need the crumbs we feed you. And so we want to wean you onto the breadcrumb diet. So we're only going to give you $600. Which is why you could see Nancy Pelosi, who 3 months ago, she said $1,200 wouldn't even be worth passing, but now $600 is significant. So it just goes to show you what everyone already knows, which is Congress is full of crap, and that the left and right are not good guys. And this is the point I'm making to you, and this is where we're going to go with the show tonight. That if you go into the idea, well, the left is correct, and that they're going to do it, you're going to get tricked. And if you go in thinking the right is correct, you're going to get tricked. There are two options. There are two wings on the same bird, and that thing needs to be shot out of the sky at this point. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention because I thought it was ridiculous. Other countries like Canada, they started out on day one giving people $2,000 to survive. And look, whatever you feel about different people, if you're a service sector worker, let's say you're in a city or something like that, these people can't go back to work. They have limited skill sets. And you know what? What you're doing is you're forcing them into abject poverty. And why are they doing that? It's part of the broader plan, which we are seeing played out again and again, that there's not a place worse than New Jersey. Maybe Gary, Indiana. No offense to the people of Gary. But anyway, what we see again and again is that we see people are just being degraded and put in worse places. We're seeing, not just that, but the lockdowns. Are any of you paying attention to the lockdown in the UK where they basically shut the whole country and now they have a terrible worse strain right on schedule? Who predicted that? Coronavirus Central, because we saw that this was too convenient. It lets old Klaus and his buddies go out there and shut everything down. And so some people were not happy about that, and that's where we're going to go for the second story today. One of the things, good to see you, and Lit, appreciate you being here. Thank you for that. One of the things that we saw in Oregon today, so I guess they were having a special meeting of the state legislature there to go ahead deciding they were going to lock people down to oblivion in Salem. And just so you understand the state of Oregon, it's one of those weird things where basically Multnomah County and the college coastal towns represent, a small swath of the state, but they vote very left-wing. I've been to Portland, I can attest. And the rest of the state looks at things very differently, and they're sick of being shut down. So a bunch of people came in there, and they were, patriots, I guess you'd say, an armed militia, whatever you want to call them, people who were going in there letting it be known that they're not going to just tolerate this. And what ended up happening is the jackbooted thugs came in to oppose them, the mercenaries of the state. And this is one of the interesting things. Historically, we're seeing something change. It had been up until relatively recently, I think, that the right had looked at law enforcement as the good guys. But I have to warn my sheepdogs out there and my friends who are in the field, if you keep defending tyrants against the people, it won't be too long before you'll be using the Eichmann defense to defend yourself. And why do I say that? Because people are pissed off, and they should be pissed off. What's happening is the theft of decency in this country. And what do I mean by decency? Do I mean our morality? No, that went out the window years ago. What I mean is the fact that you can even go ahead and have a standard to live to. And that's what's being taken away from people over and over again, and resistance is building. And so, I'll jump to the question Mr. Fatface asked me a little earlier, which was what happens on January 6th. I don't know the answer to that, but I know this. If the answer does not make the grassroots right happy, I will tell you what happens on January 7th. In fact, we'll go ahead and bring up a story. I want to read you something. You guys bear with me if I read you something today. We'll read you what I was reading earlier today. Give me 1 second to bring this up here. This is from the guy who's the head of Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes. And look, I don't generally put a lot of faith into some of the things these people say, but I'm going to share a link with you in here. And I got this from over on Telegraph, but we'll just talk about for 1 second. I'm not going to read all of it because that would take too long, but we'll just go ahead and see this. Let's just read we'll read the beginning of it and we'll read the end, and you can read the facts in the middle if you want. So this is written, with respect from the Oath Keeper organization. And this is a lot of ex-vets, okay? They're just telling you what's coming if the state doesn't solve the problem. So it says, President Trump, we now face a moment of peril as great or greater as what General Washington and his men faced in 1776. The very survival of our nation as a free constitutional republic hangs in the balance. We have but one last chance to save it. The fate of unborn millions will now depend on your conduct, the conduct of current members of our armed forces, and the conduct of the many millions of American veterans and patriots who are still loyal to our Constitution. When you were sworn in, you took the following oath as mandated by Article 2 of the Constitution. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. It's time to honor that oath by defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This is your moment of destiny. Sounds very Rubicon, doesn't it? Will you take your place in history as the savior of our republic, right up there with Washington and Lincoln, or will you fail to act while you still can and leave office on January 20th, 21? This is the important part, leaving we the people to fight a desperate revolution, civil war against an illegitimate usurper and his Chi-Com puppet regime. So that is where we are, and I just want to read the end of this, what they suggest, because they put 4 points, or they put a ton of points in here about how to do it. But invoking the Insurrection Act is what they ask for. Order the U.S. military to go to a heightened threat status, call the militia into federal service, and conduct a free election. So here's the conclusion. We're in for a fight no matter what. Let's get it done with you as our commander-in-chief. And I want to talk about that for just 1 second before I read on. The conclusion the right has made that if you can steal this election, what's to prevent people from stealing every other election? And that's true. And like I'm saying, but the thing about it is Trump hasn't really been the person who needed to be in charge to help protect people. But I'm just demonstrating the fact is we've reached a point where the system has shown such contempt toward people that people are going to go ahead and try to fight it. And here's the catch-22 to the whole deal. The system wants us to fight it. On the one hand, we have to fight it because if we don't fight it, what they give us will be awful. However, if we do fight it, it probably will give them exactly this excuse to come in there with more awfulness. This is what you end up with when you have controlled systems and when you're fighting a machine that's far bigger than you are. Nonetheless, some people are going to fight because they'd rather at least make their heroic stand. I hate to, cue Tennyson, but it feels like we're having the charge of the Light Brigade here. There's no way out but through, and we will not submit to a Chi-Com puppet regime. You must stand tall and use your constitutional powers to fight this war against enemies, foreign and domestic, while you are still president and commander-in-chief. If you fail to do so, we the people will have to fight a bloody revolution or civil war to throw off an illegitimate deep state or Chinese puppet regime. You must both use your authority to invoke the Insurrection Act and your absolute power to declassify any and all secrets. Because of the machinations of complicit mainstream media, most Americans are ignorant of just how corrupted and compromised the establishment has become. They have no idea how many political, legal, media, and business elites are now compromised puppets of communist China. Did you see that story that came out last week in Sky News where they released 2 million people worldwide who were enthralled to the CCP? Of course you didn't. Sky News covered it and Fox News didn't touch it. It just figures, right? And the thing is, it shouldn't be a left-right issue, but it is because people put ideology in the West before the nationhood, which is why, incidentally, other nations can take advantage of us and why we just spent $500 million on shekels when instead we could have spent it on our own people. Oh, what can you do? Anyway, let's see. Are now compromised puppets of communist China with the aid of deep state traders within our own intelligence and federal law enforcement agencies. And this is why you must use SOCOM and other loyal military units to do a mass data seizure, declassification, and mass data dump to throw all the skeletons out into the streets, exposing all the dirty secrets that are used to control American elites, and show the American people all the evidence that will show them who is dirty, who is a traitor, and who is a criminal. And if you want to know, just my little 2 cents here, why that doesn't happen, it's because most of them are criminals. That's what happens when you have a system where it costs $1 million to become a congressman. People have to sell their souls to go ahead and get in office. We've seen that over and over again. This will destroy the credibility of the traitors and make it far easier to defeat them, with the people themselves being the judge, and with our military service members also clearly seeing who has turned traitor and who must not be obeyed, rather. It is critical. You must do both. Expose them all and bring them to justice. Know this. Millions of American military and law enforcement veterans and many millions more loyal, patriotic gun owners stand ready to answer your call to arms and to obey your orders to get this done. Signed, Stuart Rhodes, Yale Law, 2004. I wonder if he's in Skull and Bones. Wouldn't that be a heck of a twist? And Kelly Sorrell, Texas attorney and former prosecutor. So anyway, so I read that to you, and I read it for a good reason, which is I wanted, you asked the question, what happens on the 6th, right? I'll tell you what happens on the 7th. The fight starts. Because either the left will be mad the thing is stolen, or the right will decide we have 14 days before Biden comes in there and the FBI suddenly ends up being the military wing of the ADL. So these are the sort of things you need to be aware of going forward, that we're going to now see things happen very quickly. And we're going to realize Lenin's old dictum, which is there are weeks in which years happen. And this is where we're at in this game. So what do I think will happen? Right now, I don't see a lot of strength happening anywhere. There's rumors floating around that they're going to the right wants to try to go ahead and have state legislatures question the validity of different electors, and that Vice President Pence has until the 23rd to go ahead and do that. That's my understanding from what's floating around out there, but we'll see if it's valid or not. Now, all of this, it's interesting with this show. I spend a lot of time talking about things left or right wing, and we will see. Martial law, yay or nay? Do I think? I think nay, probably, but it should happen. I don't think it'll happen until people are pushed to make it happen, but I think nay for the moment. Let's see. Insurrection Act could happen. We'll see. I enjoyed the coming Civil War. Tim from Madison. Good to see you. I'm going to assume that's Wisconsin, but am I wrong about that? In any case, glad you're here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in, Bear, and thank you for everyone who's here. VA Rifleman, glad to have you here. And welcome to everyone else who came in late or who's lurking there in the back. If you're lurking and watching, hit the like button, hit subscribe. I hear people get tossed off all the time. If you want to help, P.O. Box 35, Greenville Junction, Maine, 04442. And the Venmo is at CVCPRV. So I'm sure Dana will type that in. Or if not, you can look at any other broadcast. So help. It's Christmas. Fill my stocking with something other than coal. Because, actually, you know what? I wouldn't even mind coal. It help keep us warm. We might need coal in the future. Maybe I shouldn't be so quick to say that, right? But what was I going to say? So let's talk a little bit about where the problem is. The problem is this: like, if you study the history of revolutions that succeed usually are not left wing or right wing. What they end up being is there revolutions where people have a sense of identity that's being suppressed and it needs to be brought out. Like, take the American Revolution. Ultimately, there were existent identities that came out. People would say, oh, it was about the Stamp Act, or it was about the Sugar Act, or you could say it was about the fact they took away colonial script, which is actually a more woke interpretation of what happened with the American Revolution. But ultimately, there was a sense of identity that was forged in the battle that was greater and inclusive of us, the whole group of the people in aggregate, against them, the group of elites who oppressed us. And this is where the battle gets important. If we're going to win this thing, what it needs to be, and I know this is hard, but it has to be not left versus right. And I realize people on the left, by and large, given the fact that they kind of go along with whatever absurd idea floats out of people's minds, makes this difficult. Nonetheless, we need to go ahead and change this to a war where we're fighting for an incipient nation against what's out there. And why do I say all this to you? Because if you end up and you fight the battle on the terms they want, left versus right, all you're going to do is enable whichever side wins to be controlled by the same oligarchy you hate, oppressing you and every other people, whether you're on the winning side or the losing side, in a country where you're not going to have freedom, you're not going to have choices, you're really not going to have anything except the idea that you won the battle, and all you'll be allowed to celebrate is your victory for the glorious regime over whomever was defeated, whether it's a communist or whether you end up with a right-wing totalitarian regime instead. Ultimately, what we're not going to have is something better. We're still going to have someone who's going to stick us with vaccines, that's going to screw us out of all of our money, that's going to have some huge warfare state, and it's going to be part of the same globalist empire that goes ahead, supports the banks, and does all those other things. So what I would submit is we go back a little bit in history to where things went off the track, and let's go back to 2001 where we got tricked into certain fights. What we saw was there was an authentic grassroots movement developing against ending the Fed, against Occupy Wall Street on different levels, and now seeing how much money is being robbed from all of us. And this is big money, not just the little like, oh yeah, we're running up our debts on programs, and yeah, there's that little offensive stuff, but honestly, the right to have a choice and sovereignty in your future is what we got to stand against and say, like Andy Jackson did, we're not going to deal with the bank. And not only are we not going to deal with the bank, but we're going to begin developing a set of nationhood that is very different from how we're thinking. And that's what I'm saying, that up here in Maine, in the Atlantic homeland, and throughout this area, when left fights right, we fight to get out. That's what we need to do. When the Soviet Union falls apart, you try to be Estonia. You see what I'm saying? This is how the pathway to success should be for our future. Because the problem is you cannot fix DC. All you can do is be more awful to hold it together. And that's where we're at in the story. We are at a point where all we can do is become an empire. And look, you can have an empire when you can go ahead. I mean, if you want to have an empire at all costs, you could have that. And you could go to war, and you could annex Canada, and you could have those moments of it. But ultimately, it's only going to be held together by strong men for a little while. And eventually, it's going to be destroyed, because the price of having to exist as that is going to make your life miserable, where the choices, freedoms, and liberties we all say we like, and that fundamentally we're too spoiled to live without, would begin disappearing from it. And that's why we're going to have to do this differently. And what I would also say is that we kind of can't let things go forward. And I'm going to say something I've never said before, that on the one hand, I've always said you can't let Biden get in there, because they're going to basically go ahead, open the border, and let millions of people come in here who aren't citizens, fix every election going forward, and go ahead and rob you of a Chinese-style credit score. The problem is, so will Donald Trump. And that's what people don't recognize, that you end up in the same spot where the Operation Warp Speed vaccines are. And he's crowing about how much money the stock market made, which has fed dumps of money into their system so they can go ahead and write themselves bonuses. It's no different. It's the same game. And you know what? Ultimately, these people are going to get into a fight, but we could make an opportunity where the fight is the right fight. And so that's what I'd ask you. The question out of today's monologue is a very simple one. What I want to know is what is worth fighting for, because I ain't fighting for the United States of America. Damn, I'm not fighting for that, because it hasn't fought for me. The moment I've been born, it's told me I was to blame for everything. Sherwood Forest landed on us, Sound like Malcolm X out there, through Mel Brooks. But the thing about it is, it's really true. We have been collectively, whatever group you're in, okay, the truth of it is America has pissed all over its own people, all right? It's put us in a terrible spot. We've been abused, we've been neglected, we've been maligned, we've been mistreated. And look, yeah, I'm not going to go out there crying, saying, oh, well, boo-hoo-hoo, I didn't get a chance to get ahead. No, what I'm saying is that we need to be ready to go ahead and step forward and do something different. And what Stuart Rhodes is telling you, and what Tom Kaczynski is telling you, and everyone else is telling you, this is coming. This isn't a question of if. This is only a question of when and what's going to set it up. It could have happened in Salem, Oregon today. Could have happened in Richmond, Virginia last year. But I will tell you what will make it happen. We're going to be seeing a lot more of lockdowns. lockdowns coming forward where people's livelihoods are being destroyed. And if you think that people are just going to stick around when they're not even getting enough food, and in some places, and they're getting, well, oh, here's $600 for you. Go away, peasant. People are desperate, but they're not that desperate. And people who wouldn't usually talk are starting to talk to one another, recognizing that there's a bigger fight to be had here. And that's what I'm thinking about, because when I'm looking at this from the long-term perspective, when I'm looking at this from the history perspective, what I'm realizing is we need a different sense of nationhood. And we need a different sense that's rooted in culture, that's rooted in our people, and rooted in our localities. So I will tell you this. If everyone goes marching on Washington, you march to wherever you're from, and you make sure you put things together there, because that's where survival is going to be. That's where safety is going to be. And if there's anything worth defending, wherever you live, that's where you're going to find the happy outcomes. It's not going to come from D.C. I mean, I don't know. When all these people come in, they're planning on having like 1 million people, and we'll see if it actually happens. But 1 million armed people go down on the 6th to settle Congress. We expect a certain outcome. And what's going to happen if they get what they want? Well, we're going to see a whole bunch of other people come out and riot. And if they don't get what you want, we'll see those people riot. And look, people have reached the point where you can't just keep doing the anticipation game. You can't just lead people that far and not have it go further. And it's going to happen somewhere. I don't know where, but I think I know when. Sometime it seems like everyone wants to get through Christmas and New Year's, so maybe there'll be a false flag. You would say the government, cynically, the only way they could hold this country together is if we ended up being in a world war, and maybe that'll be provided on time. Maybe Iran will pick it off so we can have an old-fashioned Middle Eastern war, maybe have a nice terrorist attack on some city to go ahead and set things off, or maybe we'll go ahead and see the big one against China. I mean, certainly the Trump administration has been hitting at. And look, I'm not going to say China doesn't deserve what's coming to them, but nonetheless, it is the nature of these massive empires and the wars they make between them that make it impossible for these wars not to happen. And in an age of nuclear warfare and all these other things, do we want to be a party to that? Because it's the same thing we realized, frankly, out of World War II. How much did we have to become like the people we fought to go ahead and win a war like that? Mass mobilization, permanent national security state, all these sort of things, these features. You didn't need Operation Paperclip to realize that we were going to be fighting that way going forward, and it's just no good. We could do better than that, and I think we need to. So that's my thought. That's my soliloquy of that, and we're going to go ahead and see what you guys have for questions. So if you have questions, we'll go at least, if you have good questions to keep me going, I'll go the hour. Otherwise, I'll go a half hour. It's all up to you guys. So if you keep me busy and you give me things that are fun to opine on, we can do it. I hope everyone's having a good evening tonight, though. Always appreciate doing the show with each and every one of you. Kind of had a little bit of a rough day today. Just wasn't really feeling it. I mean, it's kind of been a weird day. Can anyone attest to this? It's December 21st. Some of you know winter solstice is here. We are also looking at that Jupiter-Saturn configuration. And I was looking up at the sun today, and the sun just looks different. And some people have said this, and my wife was talking with me about this, and we're up there looking at it. It just looked whiter and paler. It's just something very, very weird. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but it's just like, it's going to sound so terrible. As a Christian, I don't usually talk like this way, but it felt like the vibes were wrong. It felt like almost like there was a wickedness that was incarnate. And I just pray the blood of Jesus over this house and everyone else who's listening, hopefully for everyone to be safe. But it's going to be weird out there. And it's only going to get weirder. I mean, you can kind of feel it. People are losing their wits. So are the animals, actually. I've seen that a little bit. So we'll have to see how that goes forward here. But let's see what you all are writing. We'll start with your question. See who else here. Johnny Reb, good to see you, buddy. Glad you are here. Let's see. Really, only the American Revolution was ever successful. The other ones made things worse. Yeah, I mean, revolutions are an ugly thing, but the problem is full-scale totalitarianism is an answer. I would fully agree that we are stuck on the edge of what I think is a horrible battle that we will probably lose and that has dubious odds of victory. However, what's coming on the other side, if we don't see something like that happen, with what they want to plan with technology, I find personally worse. Now, other people might be a little more optimistic. I know we have some people who listen to this audience who sometimes try to send me things saying, oh, we're going to have a good, wonderful future with computers. I'm like, yeah, we're not even having a good, wonderful future with cell phones and computers right now. Go spend 20 minutes on TikTok and see if you still feel good about humanity. If you do, then you have less brain cells left than I do. And I'm getting pretty old for me to have to say that. So let's see what else we got here. Let's see. All right. Merry Christmas. God bless everyone. Thank you for that. What states will become the hot zones? All right. So here's what happens. let's say Trump stays in. If Trump somehow stays in, the West Coast will become the hot zone, and probably the big eastern cities, specifically New York and Chicago, will probably be ungovernable. I wouldn't want to be in Baltimore or Philadelphia either. Detroit will likely be bad. Atlanta will be a disaster. Of course, Atlanta's kind of a disaster to begin with. Much love to my Georgian friends. Too bad Patches isn't around. He'd appreciate that. But I would say that if that happens, now on the other hand, if nothing else happens on the other side, look for Texas and the Mountain West states to lead the efforts from there. But I do think I wouldn't want to be on D.C. in the 6th, but I think people need to be there, which is kind of a weird contradiction. I've gotten invited to a couple of events there over the years, but I never go. I just don't like D.C. And, I have a friend who tells me not everyone there is bad, but I just, the city feels like you're walking amongst mercenaries, and it's just always had a really nasty vibe about it. I just, the swamp needs to be swallowed. Forget draining the swamp. Let the swamp fester and leave it the hell alone. And that should be our motto, leave the swamp alone. But, people don't go ahead and think that way. However, I do think that's it. Now, if the fighting gets hot, I will tell you that the nastiest places of fighting will probably be along the Sierra Nevada, where you will see people come in from the suburbs to go ahead and stand in coastal cities, and in rural Appalachia. And specifically, I would think Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, western Maryland, maybe western New York would be pretty bad, because what's going to happen is the government's going to try to supply things from the Midwest into the cities there, and the partisans in those areas. Realistically, all right, if you were fighting a war, let's just pretend we were actually fighting it, you would go ahead. The easiest way to handle this is you'd shut down I-76, I-70, I-80, and I-90. You can make it pretty impossible with 4 SNPs to move things into the eastern part of the country. And there's plenty of places you can break up I-95 going southbound. So if you look at it that way, and you kind of have to think that way, look at that map county by county, what's red and what's blue. Wherever there are areas of condensed red stuck between key concentrations of blue, those are the areas you'd want to keep an eye out for going forward. But right now, I think that, we'll keep an eye on D.C. I don't think this will boil over until we hit the 6th. And then I think, honestly, it will probably happen it'll happen no later than the following weekend. That's my own thinking about it. But, because realistically, if you're the left wing, right, and Trump ends up taking this back after you've been told Biden's president, you're going to think this is a coup. You're going to see CNN talking about how this is the Reichstag fire all over again. And they already have sacrificed any pretense or pretext they have to the idea that they're moral actors, other than thinking, we stopped Hitler, yay, yay, yay. And the truth is, Donald Trump is nowhere near Hitler, He's just not. He's kind of a lousy populist. That's what he is. I don't want to get into a deep historical analysis of Hitler. For that you have to come visit and get the Tom Kaczynski experience. We can talk about all that history. Lord knows, I think this channel just goes enough on edge, and we're not looking to get shut down. But if the right sees this thing not happen, they're going to make the calculation. And look, the FBI bowed down for Black Lives Matter. You think that people don't remember that? That picture's been submitted around a lot, so people aren't going to believe that. And they're going to say, and maybe a couple states will have the balls to follow them. They'll say, look, we're out. We don't want to do this anymore. And Texas is the state I'd watch most closely for that. I know that they're starting to rally around a little bit. You saw what Alan West said. And I know they have an active secessionist movement down there. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. And, as far as what I would recommend to everyone else is just, kind of wait and play it by ear. If this ends up being a war of military versus military, stay the hell out of the way, because you can't win that battle. But you can defend your community, and you can provide logistical support and say, hey, and honestly, you can offer, I tell you, if your community, if this goes hot and there's things that come in, you could say, hey, we are a good community to be located in. We'll make things nice for you, protect us, defend us, expand us. Here's a flag. Go run with it. And maybe something like that. Things get weird, and you need friends, and you need powerful friends. And, would the military hold together? I just don't know. Before any other question happens, the question needs to be answered. Is the military willing to act coherently, and who will they support? In third world countries, when this happens, what usually happens is the military commits a coup and runs the government by a council of generals. That's what Pinochet did. We might see that in the United States. It's not something anyone's talking about, and I don't know who the people would be that would emerge. But on the other hand, the military does not want to get political. They're determined not to get political, and therefore they've made themselves irrelevant. They're just another prize on the battlefield. And eventually someone will realize that. I think Mike Flynn has seemed to on the right. I don't know if there's any left-leaning people. Maybe Jim Mattis is. I don't know. I mean, it's sort of weird the way these things work out. We'll see how that all plays out. But those are things that are in play. But Trump has a very short window. And I think the people, I mean, of course they know, they must know because we've been yelling at them. They realize they have about 2 weeks, seriously, to get this done because honestly, people on the right have reached the point where they just don't care anymore. They're like, you know what? We don't want peace. We don't want justice. We just want this thing to be resolved. And they've come to realize every element of the system has failed them. And they're right. The media lies. It's propaganda. Smith-Mundt getting removed absolutely destroyed any chance for people to hear the truth. Economically, we're used as serfs and servants. You can't even have a small business anymore. So forget that whole idea. You know, the kinder, gentler foreign policy. I think we just bribed Morocco to support Israel. It's nice use of your tax dollars. That went forward. That's a thing. And then all these lockdowns. You know, we say, hey, we have to fight this disease, but we're going to go party like Gavin Newsom did. So, you know, you look at it and people have had enough. And even people on the left, man, I was just looking on Twitter. For Israel was trending, and you see a bunch of blue check marks going against it. This is a fight where we could have something better, but we have to have that conversation. And the truth is, things probably have to get worse before they get better. But nonetheless, we're up here talking about that. And what I say, and really, if I'm being more narrow about it, we have a little Europe here in America and in Canada. It's the Maritimes, Quebec, and northern New England. You get south of that, the places there want to act like hive cities and they want to be part of the globalist empire. We don't want to do that. And I think we can organize it a little bit. And so that's what I'm working on, you know. And I don't know, I got that 1917 look going. What do you think? Kameraden. I don't know. I think I'm looking more Slavic these days. It's like, but now I don't look like ZZ Top. So we let Dana trim this down. You have to let me know if you like what she did. But my wife did a wonderful job. I want to thank her. She's over there listening in the other room right now. At least I think she is. She might not be. Maybe she found something more entertaining than me. But nonetheless, you guys are stuck with me for at least a little bit longer. So let's see what all you're right about. Everyone who agrees with Tom should hit the like button. That way we can figure out how many lurkers are here. Yeah, I know there's lurkers who follow me. There's people who are obsessed about me. It's really sad. I mean, like, here's the thing. I don't actually watch people I hate. Like, I'll read a book to get an ideology. I'll commit like 2 hours of my life. But I couldn't imagine like spending, I don't know, it would be like, who's a big name on the far left? It would be like if I spent like 8 hours a week watching these people. Why would I watch something I disagree with that doesn't educate me and just makes me mad? I mean, dude, go do something else. Go smoke a joint or something. Go. I mean, honestly, just do something better. It's Christmas, man. Take the week off. I'm not going to start the revolution till January. You're safe. Go talk to your comrades there. It's just funny. Anyway, Aristotle's cycle of government is very real. I agree with that. That's a good point. Let's see. There's very little Biden would do that Trump will not allow to be done. Yeah, there's no difference. There's a lot less difference than people presume. Anarchy, monarchy, dictatorship, aristocracy, oligarchy, democracy, ochlocracy, anarchy. Ochlocracy is mob rule, right? Isn't that what it is, if I remember right? And then anarchy. Yeah, no, and you know what? So let's skip anarchy and mob rule, and here we go. I'm here. Do I look like I'm ready? I'm ready to go walk across the thing at Minas Tirith. You know, I guess I had a little crown or something. People always say it's funny for me. You know what? But I want like a little thin crown. I could wear my little Slavic hat. Dana always says, don't put it on. She's like, you're going to make yourself into a meme. I'm like, I don't care. You know what? But I am nice and shiny right now. Although I don't necessarily like it this time of year because it ends up being way too cool. But you know what? I could pass as a Jacobin. What do you think? Does it work? My little medieval outfit? I go to Ren Fair, so I have some fun with it, and that's okay. I like doing it. I am just humble kulak. All right. What else do we got here? I would rather see several dozen large armed gatherings in rural areas and mid-sized cities in red states than a big march on Washington. Well, Canez is absolutely right. Imagine if a couple states just said no, we're out. Imagine if Dixie said they were out. Just imagine that. Who's going to fight for them? What are you going to do? You're going to have people, you're going to have, Joe Biden's going to go to New York and say, hey, we're going to conscript. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Crazy. But it's that's what needs to happen. People who can organize and say we're out. I mean, this thing is being held together by dumb bands and rubber bands and duct tape. That's all it is. Armed, yeah, supposedly they're coming in armed, Ryan. That's what I've heard. We'll see if that's the truth or not, but that's what I've heard. Protesters with rifles And they're planning a big march on the 6th, and I don't think they plan on going home if they don't get what they want. So Congress better think, because, here's the lesson of it. And let's be honest with you. What we've learned is that certain people are allowed to break the law with impunity. This was something that was set up when Black Lives Matter was allowed to destroy Minneapolis, and when you saw Seattle have an autonomous zone and Portland was on fire for, what was it, over 100 days, people on the right concluded that force is the only thing that matters. And really, that is somewhat true in politics. If you want to deal with morality, go read the Bible. In fact, it's a better way to spend your time, to be honest. But if you're in this cynical, sordid field, this is what the conclusions are. And realistically, what we've seen is the absence of law for one side and that the enforcement selectively against others. And I think that being the case, people have had enough, and they're just like, we're not going to take this anymore. We don't want to be in tyranny. We'd rather fight, because they think, what better odds? You can't have an election. It's the whole thing, the old, soapbox, ballot box, jury box. The Supreme Court let that one go. Now we're at the ammo box, and that's it. All right. Who else do we got here? How to separate our Catholic brothers in Christ from the Catholic Church? Well, Bear, I tell you what, that's an interesting conversation. I would love to have it. You all know that I am not. I've had plenty of streams where I've talked about my issues with Catholic doctrine. In fact, today, great moments in Catholic history. Pope Francis went out there and said how it's okay to go ahead and use vaccines that have aborted fetal tissue, which will be another interesting thing to hear. I do feel bad. They have an anti-pope. To be fair, the Catholic Church has had better moments than this. I think this pope will be remembered with a lot of scorn and infamy, and hopefully they'll get smart and ban the Jesuit order again, because the more you study the Jesuits, the less you like them. It's the truth of it. But I think that, when it comes down to it, the message of salvation through Christ is simple. We affirm the creeds of it. And if you want to be a Christian, it's real simple. You say, that I accept Jesus died for me, for my sins, and that he rose again on the third day. And that's where it's at. It's real simple. And that, he's your savior. So, and I feel strong about that. Let's see. What else we got here? Washington police will be hostile. Yeah, no, they will. But you know what? If there's enough numbers, police are not going to go near that. The question is who's better organized. And this is a battle of will now. We're going to be dealing with something that looks like I don't know, like maybe 1991 in Russia. It might be worth reviewing that. Maybe we'll do that. You guys want to do a show like that where we look at when governments collapsed and how it went? Would you guys tune in if we did that? Maybe I'll set up a screen behind me and we'll look. Okay, so this is when the Soviet Union collapsed, and this is when Tiananmen Square happened, and this is what happened in Russia or in Serbia, or whatever. We could look at some of these things and go. It'd be interesting to do a review. No one's done that in a while. We could look at Tahrir Square and the Maidan. I think that'd be fun. Would you guys do a show like that? You have to get my numbers up, though. That's a lot of research for me to do, but it might be worth doing it. So we'll see if you guys persuade me. You have to bribe me, make me feel like it's worth the effort, Otherwise, I can just come and opine. The release of the COVID mutation, writes Richard, and good to see you, is very timely to say the least. I felt it too, Tom. It's really windy this time of year. Today was eerily calm. Yeah, Richard, I feel you. It was messed up out there. It feels off. I don't know how else to put it. The Smithsonians are nice. Let's see. Staunch Catholic. Let's agree that Christ is the savior of mankind. I can agree on that. You know what? I don't think, for what it's worth, my Catholic brothers, and I give you guys a hard time, I don't actually think it's a salvation issue as long as you accept Jesus. That's what the book says. But, we'll find out. We're all making our bets, right? So let's see. Do I see New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada joining Mother Mexico soon? Demography is destiny, as Buchanan said. Let me say that. Do I see New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada joining Madre Mexico? No, I don't. Here's what I see happening. In my mapping of this, what I think happens is Southern California, Las Vegas, Arizona, and Western New Mexico will eventually be a separate state that will be a transitional Latino state primarily that is not Mexico, but separate. I could see Baja, also maybe Sonora joining that, and it would actually make more sense. Northern Mexico and southern Mexico do not think at all alike. The Azteca, the southern part of Mexico, well, I should say there's the Mayan Riviera, there's that part, which tries to revolt all the time, and that's where like sort of guerrillas and indigenous tribes are found. There's the center of it, which is like this Aztec heartland, and then the north, which is a lot more like the United States, actually. So you could have two states, actually, and then in the division map we draw, I've often thought Texas would maybe unite with some of the border states just south of it, and you would see California do the same. And I think that's reasonable that those lines in the borderlands will come together. It's the same thing between Maine and New Brunswick in a lot of ways. We have more in common with New Brunswickers in aggregate, once you get beyond the sort of weird, superficial things, than you do, say, from someone in Connecticut. So what ends up happening is borderlands often end up being quite porous, and when things happen along there, the border center, whether it be the Rio Grande River, whether it be the California Baja border, or whether it be the St. Croix River up here, you would end up seeing the ability for things to come across that. So, but I do think that those states would probably stick together, and I think, Utah and parts of Colorado, maybe not Denver. Denver's a weird city. I didn't know where to put it when I drew the map. You could see that maybe all being part of a greater Northwest. And I do think if there's one place where fights going to happen, it's going to be the Pacific Northwest. And part of this is culture. There's not a lot of identity apart from ideology. And on one hand, you have radical libertarian individualism, which is the Mountain West ideology. And then you have ecotopian sort of socialism, which is the left wing. Those two can't coexist. They're going to fight, and they're probably going to fight in Oregon, given the way this has been happening. So, because they've been closed a couple times, like what happened in Burns. People forget about where they occupied federal territory. But there's lots of people in Idaho who'd probably be happy to come across and help the Oregonians because they realize that they need a path to the sea. Let's put it this way. If a civil war happens and if the military doesn't protect them, literally Portland, Oregon will be playing the role of the Confederate Atlanta. So take that for what it's worth. Of course, Atlanta might play the role of Confederate Atlanta again as well, because I think there's a lot of people down south that are not keen on the way that city's developed, which is one of the problems, Let's see. Who was Hitler's grandfather? That's a good question, and I've heard some of these stories. I don't know. I've heard the Rothschild one here. Let's see. Stop, please. All right. Bum, bum, bum. Let's see. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, in fighting, this is the time and place for it. Look, if you want to have the fight, honestly, you're not going to persuade anyone and convert them. If you can convert them, you convert them 1-1, and that's it. And people have the arguments, so I'm not going to go there. Trump created and staffed space forces. They called them Guardians. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't know what I make of the whole Space Force thing. I don't really take it super seriously at this point, but I have heard Project Bluebeam is in play. For those who aren't aware of it, it's the idea that the government will pretend we're being attacked by aliens. So maybe. Just because you see something, you can't believe everything you see. You should know that by now. Let's see. If the U.S. was going to go to civil war, what side would foreign actors take? Well, it depends who's in charge, right? So I think that most foreign actors would just want to see the destruction of the U.S., so they would support whatever side could destabilize it. The goal of foreign actors isn't to take over the United States in aggregate, except for maybe the Chinese. They need food. But the other ones, like the Russians and all that, they would just want to have a system where they don't have any threats to their own actions. Say if they wanted to go ahead and annex eastern Ukraine or suck up the Baltic republics. I think that's kind of where the mindset would be in that deal. But I do think the Chinese have been playing a very different game, and they've got a big problem with their food supply. We've talked about this a couple times, but their soil isn't doing very well. They can't feed their own people. It's one of the reasons why they're looking to go to war. And the other reason is they actually believe that's how, they need to go forward. There's an AI war. There's a lot of depth in this. There's bits and pieces, but Chinese strategic doctrine is pretty bloody. Genocide ain't a thing to China. And besides, they feel like they owe someone one after Nanjing, which is kind of funny because, the U.S. was actually fighting with China in that war, which we probably shouldn't have been if you really get into it, but that gets into Roosevelt and opium running. So, it's just one more example why America should be getting into foreign wars if we can help it. Whatever horrible things China did, us fighting a war against them is only going to make us more like them. And that's the problem of fighting these wars. It happens every damn time. Let's see. Do I think Mexico could make a move for southwestern USA? No, I don't think that's the case. Mexico doesn't have much of an army. The cartels would rather have informal control. I think that you would see I mean, it's interesting because I think it's going to start out maybe as like two sides, but it's going to quickly have a lot more. I started working, actually. We'll see if I write it, but I started working on the line for the next book for American Winter, and I was writing about what it is we'd really be fighting over. And I had 3 chapters in there, which was America in 2, America in 3, and America in 12. And what were they about? It was about the idea that, yes, we're looking at this narrow left-right division, but what you would find is there's 3 meta regions in the U.S., the North, South, and West, okay? And the West basically is the mountains and the coastal areas. The South is Dixie and the Gulf. And the East is you'd say the coastal, the Midwest, and an Appalachia between it. So you can divide it different ways. And when you start to look at this, what happens is as you break away from existing political orders, you'll find the topography, economies, the way people actually run their societies, the logistics of it matter a lot more. And you can kind of predict where the lines on the map are going to fall out. Like, for instance, the government's going to fight to the death to defend New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Ohio, maybe Michigan, maybe not, Illinois, and Indiana. That's their key bread and butter corridor, Virginia, too, because of what's in there. And you're going to have those be the areas. Whereas if you're outside that, you'll probably be able to be somewhat successful. So whoever is in charge, if it's Trump, he'll have to consolidate control of that area and deal with riots. If it's Biden, he'll have to get control of the in-between areas on there so he can prosecute a war if it ends up going forward that way. And if there are other actors, you just use left or right wing, sort of whichever way it goes forward. But I don't really see a lot of foreign actors coming in directly. I think that they might fund partisans, and you might have like Spetsnaz type teams in there. I mean, who knows? If things got funny, I mean, I think anyone would look for help wherever they have it. If we had, for instance, if we declared independence in the far Northeast, let's just pretend, we'd be fools to not accept help if it came in there. But that can't happen. You can't do anything. I mean, this is the irony of the whole thing, right? You can't do something until you do, or you can't do anything unless you do everything. And no one wants to start by doing something. And that's kind of what we're stuck at. Let's see. Do I think people are poised to fight? I know there are small groups and pockets, but generally it seems like it's all words and no actions from the people who claim to care. No, they're not ready, but I think the fight's going to come on them. I think enough people are going to do something where people can't back down that it's going to happen quickly. And so here's your advantage. The small group that can get out there first and seem to have their act together is going to have a lot of people migrate to them, and you'll be able to make a much bigger change than you would expect. Look at the history of how Napoleon, who was a lieutenant of artillery, who saw an opportunity with how he was able to become very quickly the Emperor of France by picking the right alliances. Same sort of things a lot of people in history who kind of rose up as monarchs of the people, you know, for better or worse. You can begin to look at these things. But I think there are people poised to fight. Yeah, I do. I think absolutely. And besides, it's not only that you have to fight. I mean, you could fight this war, and it's as ugly, but it's the truth, so I'll share it. You're going to have people who are going to fight a different way. They're going to fight by making the country unworkable. You know, you hear about these trucker strikes. What happens if a group decides they're just going to take the power grid down every week? The system is not going to hold together very long, and it's already very fragile. So someone, and even if we don't, I think a foreign actor would do this because it's just too tempting. I mean, it's perfect asymmetrical warfare, right? You're going to go forward there, and you're going to see this fall apart. So the question is, what bonds can you make that will hold together right now? But it's a great question, Skeptical, and it's something it's worth asking because we don't really know. But we'll have to see. That's my guess. And you know what? I'm sort of paranoid, pragmatic, what do you say, pessimist. So we'll see. All right. A lot of your detractors don't celebrate Christmas. Know what I'm saying? Yeah, no, I do know what you're saying. I'll be honest, I've been tempted to not celebrate Christmas this year, and that would probably surprise most of you. But the truth is, if you really do the research on it, Jesus' birthday's in April, and I don't like a lot of the accoutrements that are about Christmas at this point. I think it's a distraction from what it should be about. So there's actually a pretty decent chance I might be with you on Friday, just for that reason. Not because I'm not going to worship the Lord or because I take it seriously, but I'm one of those people who kind of gets, like, I'll give you the perfect example. Like, if you have a Facebook account, or if you used to have a Facebook account, did you ever dread when your birthday came and like 1,000 people who never give a damn about you any other day of the year say, "Hey, happy birthday, happy to see you, glad to see you"? I'm like, don't pretend. If you're only going to talk to me one day a year, just save the day. It's fine. You don't have to. And that's how I feel about Christmas. You know, the Lord's celebration is something that should happen every day. It's nice to have our holidays. I understand rituals are important to people. I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling a little dogmatic. Maybe the apocalypse is finally getting to me, you know? Who knows? Or maybe the egg's finally fried. I don't know. But I am going to try to have a very nice Christmas in spite of that with the wife. And we'll try to celebrate it quietly, as we often do up here in Maine. So let's see what we have. I know people are ready to fight. It is the right time. United Constitutional Counties of America versus communist cities. See, here's the thing, though. I don't think we should fight for the Constitution. I'll tell you what. I don't really like. Honestly, I think people fight better when they fight for faith. I would like to see the faith brought back. I actually believe that. I know people have issues with that, but we don't have a moral center, and that's at the heart of it. I mean, I think the idea that we're going to we have this American mythology where how should we say it? We turn them into totems or idols, are sort of secular features. Like I've gone back and looked at the Articles of Confederation, and I've looked at the writings of John Adams a little bit, and I've looked at the writings of Jefferson, and I've looked at some of these things. I'm like, I think we could do better. I think it's time for us to do something different. And my push, I don't really want to see America come back together. I really want to see Dixie have its own nation. I really want to see nation. Whether or not that includes the Midwest, we'll see if that happens. It could make sense, or they may do their own thing. I respect them if they do. I want to see Texas have the chance to be free. I know the guys out west think that's differently, or the people in Cascadia or California, and I think that's better. I think it'll be better for all of us, honestly. I think that we have too many people under one set of laws, and it just doesn't work anymore. And if you want to have a constitutional republic, God bless you. Up here, it just doesn't make sense for us. I mean, realistically, order is what we want, and we want to have order and a degree of collectivism, but hopefully it's not against our people or our traditions, and maybe bring a little bit of morality back into it. And I know that's a lot to ask, but honestly, I think that, if we had maybe 10 different options instead of just 2, maybe we wouldn't have to fight. We'd see people move to places that make sense, and then we could have good fences be good neighbors, and I don't know. Do we need another brothers war? I mean, do we need to all go fight one another? But, the people on the left, I mean, a lot of people are just brainwashed, and there's actually a very few people who are pushing things along. And even with the communist thing, if it wasn't for literally probably many billions of dollars of subsidies being put into education from multiple sources, there's no way those ideas would stick. And the minute people start shooting, let me tell you something, everyone, just like they say, was a lot of conversions in the foxhole. Everyone's going to change their opinion. For instance, all these white women are going to be going so far away. Where's the biggest strong guy with the beard I can find? All of a sudden things, the guy who has the truck will be popular. And you know what? That's what it is. It's about survival. But that's where we're going with this, I think. And I kind of feel sad on it, because on the one hand, we need to be fighting bigger global battles against this vax thing, against the transhumanist rollout. But you got to win the battle in front of you. And realistically, as I said in all of my writing, if you go back and read Coming Civil War, I said this, that we have to own somewhere under sovereignty to have a chance. And if we have a war of left versus right and either side wins, whichever side wins is going to be an empire that will not give a damn about what any of us think. It will be more powerful, more remote, and more distant, and we just can't afford that, because there's no way it's going to go well. I have no faith. I don't have faith in any man to do that. I mean, that's why when I set up New Albion, even, I gave a lot of power. I gave the power of the purse definitely locally, because if not, anyone could become a tyrant. I mean, it's easy to hate people. Try being a public figure sometime and having hate pieces written on yourself and your wife, and have 10 million people think it's funny to send anonymous comments talking about how horrible you are. All of a sudden, you won't like people either, and that's the way it is. And that's why a lot of royal families that stick around try to spend all their time doing puff things and appearing to have no power while they look like they're just for the people. And that's good leadership, by the way. You don't want to look like you're exerting power if you don't have to. Better to let people think they have their own decision. Any married man would know that's the way you play the game, right? Love you, honey. All right, what else we got here? Cartridge box. There you go. That sounds like a bad idea. A bunch of guys with guns sounds like a party for federal agents. Yeah, no, it's. But the problem is, what are you going to do? You got to do something. And when it happens, it probably will eventually at some point. There's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to happen. It's going to be a Boston Massacre type scene. It's inevitable. It might not happen there. It could happen at a state capital. Could happen for whatever reason. Michigan's a state I'd rate as not improbable. Gretchen Whitmer is very unpopular with certain people like the Yoopers. So we'll see what happens. Let's see. Extra ecclesiam nulla salus. I'm not going to get into the Catholic stuff with the Azatlan. I do know about Azatlan. Remember, I grew up in Arizona, so I definitely get this. Let's see. I hate to say this, Andrew. Good to see you, by the way. I have supported Trump all along, but he will go out quietly on January 20th. The senior military leaders selected for the subservience are taking him out of it. Yeah, I don't expect much from Trump, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of people have reached the point where they understand that the game has been played with them. This isn't about Trump. A lot of people on the left think, oh, this is about Trump. It's not about Trump. This is about something more fundamental about the way it works, and that people who have a belief that things used to be better than they were and aren't happy with progress are thinking it's time to roll back the clock. And realistically, it's a problem for the right because the right can't fight this. It's like I was telling you about Caesar. The right can't fight this in the institutions because they don't have any. All the right has is pissed off people and guns. So you know what? When you're hammer, there's a lot of nails out there. That's where we're at. And if people don't like that, well, you know what? That's what happens when you use cancel culture to destroy any opposition. If the alt-right was still functioning, or you would have allowed a real opposition, or if the churches had been badgered out of politics, there might be a space for people to serve as collaborators, or at least communicators, mediators, to build bridges. But at this point, everyone's looking across a canyon with a bunch of rifles eyeing one another, just wondering who's going to get thrown into the abyss. And that's where we're at. And there's just, who's going to be the go-between? Who has credibility? Nobody. I mean, honestly, who can you imagine? You tell me, who would you imagine that could talk to the left and right and have, credibility? Because the minute one supports one, you're not going to trust the other. It's just how it is. All right, debates over Christianity are pointless. Let's see. Christianity is Protestant, Orthodox, Catholic. Yeah, it's better not to fight. Mormons. Man, you know what? This is so hard. So let me just share some. Let me be real for a moment. My two loves are theology. Well, I love maps more than anything, but my two loves are theology and politics. And I have to talk about one, I have to put the other aside because I would love to get up here and give you the hellfire brimstone speech about what denominations believe what, but politics is all about making bedfellows. Though you remember, it's interesting in the Bible, Solomon actually, who was supposed to be the wisest of all men, actually was frowned upon for the Lord because he went ahead and allowed he married a lot of wives, which wasn't great, but he did that. And when he did that, he brought in their gods and allowed them to have their personal things, which is why they say Israel was ultimately broken into two. And so you kind of wonder at the end, maybe it will work out where different states will have different religions. And, even within that, it's interesting. I was reading a book about, what was it called? It was the movement. It was how the Church of Christ started in America. It was an effort to reconcile all the different denominations. And they ended up schisming into three of their own and converting no one, which just goes to show you, read the Bible, connect to Jesus that way. It's the best way to go about it because learned people in here could probably chat for a couple hours. It'd be interesting. And we would show off our ability to make different arguments and to quote scripture. And I don't think any of us would convert each other at all, just the way it is. So it's the way you got to do it. It's fine. Let's see. I remember back in the Obama administration when Republicans were talking about fighting the government. It's a whole lot different now. There's a ring of truth when I hear, yeah, I mean, you know what? Because the thing is, when's it get better? And let's say Biden gets in there. Let's just play it out, right? Under standard thing. He's going to go ahead and first off, if they fix one election, they're going to fix every other election because they know people won't stand up to it. That's the first thing. So you've accepted a one-party state. You also know that they're going to give immigration openings to whoever they want and that they're going to go ahead and stick law enforcement on anyone who goes against these sort of things. UBI will be coming, social credit score will be coming, all those things. And you got to think, well, are you going to be able to fight this later when it gets worse? Because people always like, well, it's not so bad for me. I'll wait till a better time. But there's not going to be a better time. Now things are getting worse, right? And things are going to continue to get worse. And so the fight is here. But the problem is it actually the fight they want us to have? Because what I keep thinking is that we are being led into this fight by our nose. And that's why I think on a global scale, the takedown of the U.S. is part of the game. And so if we try to reconstruct the U.S., it's going to go badly. It's one of the other reasons I think we're probably better off just going separate. I mean, look, pretend you live in like Hungary. Who wouldn't want to live in Hungary, right? It's quiet. You don't get drawn into attention. You're allowed to have the laws you want to have. That is the way forward. Being hegemon, all roads may lead to Rome, but there's a lot of potholes in them by the time you get to 250 years in. Let's see. If China's involved in the U.S., it wouldn't make sense for Russia not to support the other side on the low. Expansionist China to use your south isn't smart. Enemy is my friend. China and Russia have an incredibly complex relationship where they fought a lot of wars and they don't trust one another. That's why Russia keeps its technology sort of ahead of the game a little bit. But I do think Russia would actually, if there were right-wing breakout secessionist groups, Russia would probably arm them. I mean, they had a meeting, I don't know how many years ago it was, where there were some Texas secessionists who were invited to St. Petersburg. This was back when Obama was in there. And supposedly there were conversations that happened. I have no specific knowledge of this, but there were a lot of stories written about it at the time. And it makes logical sense, to be honest with you. Ivan would probably be an ally to people who are right of center against a regime they didn't like. Putin's on record as saying if Hillary had won, they would have had a first strike nuke on the U.S. And if Biden gets in there, don't be surprised if they're planning on going ahead and getting tough, if that might not happen. All these cyber strikes that were out there. What if they really can disable the ability to have a second strike capacity? you could take U.S. out in a couple minutes if we can't go ahead and defend. That's a real possibility, and I don't think people should look about it. Thank you, Landon. I'm glad you appreciate the look. Definitely, yeah. No, I'm having a little fun for Christmas, so I'm very fond of this outfit. I don't wear it too often, but I actually like to do the look. So it's maybe who knows? Maybe if I do a little better next year, you guys buy a couple more books, I'll get one or two more. They're actually quite comfortable. It's enjoyable. Let's see what happens in Hawaii and the Pacific territories in the breakup. Kingdom of Hawaii in a close relationship with China. I do think Hawaii should probably be its own entity, like a little Polynesian kingdom. I don't know. It's up to the Hawaiians. It could end up being a little military state. I mean, something weird could come out of it, but I know the natives there. Hawaii doesn't have a lot of Chinese, from what I understand. There's a lot of Japanese there. It wouldn't shock me to see, actually, given the fact that China would cause problems, Japan would be worried. I wouldn't be surprised to see a autonomous Hawaii as a Japanese protectorate if everything really fell apart. But I haven't ever been to Hawaii. I've talked to people who've lived there, and they tell me that's the demography. So we will see what ends up happening there. What else we got? Let's see. U.S. and Russia. U.S. should have been allied with Russia a long time ago. But we're not, because our own institutions are not. Because the same people who put in the Soviet Union are the same people who are behind this sort of thing, Wall Street finance. And you can trace who those people are. I mean, it's a combination. It's the three bads, right? Look for where the three big obelisks are, and you understand who runs the world. And, in the interest of domestic tranquility, I'm not going to get into too much where it is, but you can find them. There are three cities that have extra legal authority within major countries, and they're hiding within Italy, the U.S., and the U.K. Go look at those tassels on those flags, right? So anyway, we'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, the Dark Winter was not a Russian attack. It's probably the deep state working against itself. And, who knows where Gina Haspel's been? The CIA's been missing. When I was reading Anthony Tata's book, I read all 6 of them, by the way, and they were talking about this. He talked about an idea where a president pretended to die and set up like this big sting to get out everyone who's in the government. Who knows? Maybe this will play out this way in some weird way, not because I trust President Trump, but because things could happen in a very interesting way. But I do think as we go forward, and I'm bringing this to a close here for you guys, unless you have any last-minute questions, is that you need to be thinking not about how you take over the U.S., but how you live in a country worth living in. And what that means is getting beyond simple ideology and recognizing what it means to live where you live. If where you live is totally defined by where you work, you're not in a good place. Move somewhere else. Maine has a sense of itself. Idaho, West Virginia, there are places in this. The rural deep south, Texas, Whereas if you're in a nondescript, unending suburb, I'm thinking of how I grew up in Phoenix, then you're just going to be a part of the Reconquista. Comprende? All right. Adio. All right. Heavenly Father, today's prayer is, as we go forward to Christmas, I just want to say thank you and offer praise for what you've done for us, for the many opportunities you've given us in this country, and the hope that what we build in the future will be something worthy of you, that we will follow your laws. We will remember to treat our enemies like our brothers, and remember that we don't need more brothers' wars. So I'm going to try to learn from the lesson of Christ, speak truth to power as best I can, and remember that we do this in gratitude and trying to be a peacemaker who's not afraid to carry a sword. So I just pray for everyone in this chat to have a safe, healthy Christmas with their family, with their loved ones. And that everyone be in the best of spirits in this holiday season, because I know next year's going to be very difficult. And I pray that your justice will rule, your strength be on each of us, your mercy be taken for us, and that you just help all of us, because I know a lot of people are struggling right now, and I'm one of them. So in Jesus' name, I pray that. And that's where I'm at on that. So amen. Christ is King, absolutely. The D.C., City of London, and Vatican, man. Trilaterals over Washington. Go find the book, Dr. Anthony Sutton. You can find these things. They're out there if you know where to look. How to convince these people to turn against those 3 sovereign states? Well, you stop giving power to Mammon so that you don't go ahead and give power to the financial system anymore. You don't support D.C. when the next awful war comes. And if you start hearing things about, from Christians that don't comport with the Bible, you don't listen to them. That's a good lesson for every one of us to learn. In the end, the book that you should be reading, beyond mine, of course, much more important than mine, is go read the Bible. Spend some time with Christ as we come to the holiday season. If you guys reach out to me a little bit, maybe I'll do a Friday show. Would there be, actually, before I go, would there be interest? If I do a Friday show, you guys could be busy. I mean, do you want escape from your family, or do you want me to show up? So if not, it's nothing off my back to not show up for a little bit. So, but I'll think about it if you guys let me know. know if I should or shouldn't. I'd appreciate the feedback. And you can put it in the community page. Maybe I'll put a vote up for it. So see if I should have a show. If not, or if I should just take the day off. Because Lord knows I could use time off. But I'm not. I never take time off. I'm worst at it. I'm probably going to be writing another book now. And it's a book that, this book might get me banned. We'll see. I'm always pushing the envelope as much as I can. But, we've reached the time. I said that, it's like I said in Coming Civil War, you got to, when we reach a certain point, you just have to accept it's go time. And it's pretty close to go time. So get right with God. Get right with your family. Don't let any acrimony be out there. And one last thing. Don't let things that you want to be said be unsaid. Now's the time to do it. So, Patch, it's good to see you here. And Feliz Navidad to Grand Flash. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a very good, blessed evening. God bless.